Callum Price was found dead in his car on a quiet Nottingham street. No witnesses, no sound, no trace of the killer. 3 years later, a stolen medieval manuscript hidden in a Belgian museum exposed a web of secrets, revealing that Callum wasn't just a victim. He was the key to a global smuggling ring. What began as a silent hit would uncover a conspiracy that stretched far beyond anything Nottingham had ever seen. Cranmer Street was still and quiet that morning, the kind of silence that only comes before the world fully wakes. The sky hung low with grey clouds, and most houses along the road still had their curtains drawn. It was just after 6 a.m. when a dog walker spotted something odd. A car parked slightly askew along the curb, hazard lights blinking slowly in the gloom. Nothing about it screamed emergency at first glance. But as the dog barked and tugged at its leash, the man peered through the driver's side window and froze. Inside, slumped slightly to the left in the driver's seat, was a young man. His seatbelt was still fastened. The engine, strangely, was still warm. At first, the man assumed it was a medical issue, maybe a seizure, maybe a heart attack. But something didn't sit right. The driver's posture was too still. His skin was pale, almost grey. He wasn't sleeping or passed out. He was gone. By the time emergency services arrived, the car had become the centre of a growing circle of onlookers. Police officers cordoned off the area, covering the vehicle in a protective tent as forensic teams moved in. Paramedics confirmed what the dog walker already suspected. The driver, later identified as 29-year-old Callum Price, was dead. But what puzzled authorities most was the complete lack of any signs of violence. There was no broken glass, no struggle, no blood visible. From outside the car, in fact, nothing looked disturbed at all. It wasn't until the body was removed that the truth began to surface. Callum had a single gunshot wound to the chest, expertly placed and almost surgically clean. There was little bleeding, as though the shot had been delivered at just the right angle and distance to avoid any visible trauma. Even more unsettling, no shell casing was found, no powder residue, no sound had been reported by neighbours. It was as if someone had simply walked up to the car, pulled the trigger, and disappeared into the quiet morning. Investigators initially treated the case as a possible gang-related hit, but that theory quickly began to fall apart. Callum had no criminal record, no known affiliations. He lived alone in a small flat just 5 minutes from where his body was found. He worked as a personal trainer at a local gym. He had friends, clients, and a clean police history. Nothing about him fit the profile of someone marked for assassination. And yet, the method of his death was unmistakably professional. A silenced weapon, no trace of the shooter, no witnesses. Whoever had done this had experience and confidence. The scene was left almost pristine, as if designed to confuse and delay investigators. And it worked. As police scoured CCTV footage, doorbell cameras, and local interviews, the case yielded almost nothing. No one saw or heard anything. There were no obvious enemies. And yet Callum Price had been executed in cold blood, right in the middle of a quiet residential street, with surgical precision. Whatever the motive, one thing was clear. This was not random. This was personal, and it was just the beginning. Callum Price had always seemed like the kind of man people didn't worry about. He was calm, well-mannered, and quietly ambitious. At 29, he had built a modest but stable life in Nottingham. He worked at a local gym, trained clients both in person and online, and maintained a low profile. His social media painted a picture of early morning workouts, smoothies, and motivational quotes. He lived alone in a small but tidy flat and had few close friends, but plenty of acquaintances. To most, he was just another young professional, doing his best. But when detectives began digging into his background following his death, cracks began to form in the clean image he left behind. Bank records revealed something unusual. 2 wire transfers totaling over $40,000 had been deposited into Callum's account in the 8 weeks leading up to his murder. The payments came from offshore accounts registered in jurisdictions known for financial secrecy. The names on the transfers were meaningless. There were no notes, no contracts, and no tax records to explain the sudden influx of money. Even more puzzling was how Callum had used the money. He hadn't purchased anything extravagant. No new car, no holidays, no shopping sprees. Instead, he had withdrawn much of it in cash, sometimes in sums just below the reporting threshold. He'd become careful, deliberate. He'd also started renting a small storage unit under a different name in a nearby industrial estate. When police gained access to it, they found only an empty duffel bag and a disposable phone, wiped clean of any data. It felt more like a drop point than a storage space. Further investigation uncovered a series of unusual meetings. On several occasions, Callum had been captured on distant CCTV footage, walking through parks at odd hours, early morning, or just after sunset. He always arrived alone, never on foot for long, and never parked in the same place twice. With grainy footage and no usable facial recognition, it was hard to make out who he met, but it was clear he wasn't there for exercise. In one clip, taken from a private building's security camera near the Arboretum, Callum was seen exchanging a small object with a man in a dark coat. They didn't speak. The interaction lasted less than a minute. The man never looked at the camera. Police had no name for him, but a pattern emerged. The same figure appeared in other clips, always, keeping distance, always covered, and never appearing in 2 locations on the same day. Whoever he was, Callum met with him at least 3 times over the course of 6 weeks. The man would come to be known in the investigation only as Grayson. Detectives began to suspect that Callum, whether knowingly or not, had become involved in something much bigger than he understood. Smuggling was one possibility, money laundering another. But the way he moved, the secrecy of the meetings, and the offshore payments all hinted at a tightly controlled operation. Callum had secrets, and someone had made sure they stayed buried. The breakthrough came almost by accident. While combing through hours of CCTV footage from nearby roads, a junior officer flagged something unusual. Just a few streets over from where Callum's car was found, a black Audi had appeared repeatedly. On traffic cameras, the license plates were clean at first glance, but when cross-referenced with national vehicle databases, they didn't match the car's make or model. They were cloned. The Audi had been using stolen plates, which meant someone didn't want to be followed. The footage showed the Audi trailing Callum's silver Vauxhall Astra the night before his body was found. The distance between the 2 cars never narrowed beyond 2 vehicles apart. It followed him from the city centre, through several turns, and into West Bridgeford. Then, at precisely 2:14 a.m., both cars moved off-camera, and Callum was never seen alive again. The Audi was the last vehicle to follow him before his death. 12 hours later, the same Audi was discovered in a public car park near the River Trent. It had been abandoned between 2 larger vehicles, partially obscured from view. The inside was immaculate. Not a single fingerprint, strand of hair, or fibre. It had been thoroughly cleaned. Doors, dashboard, even the steering wheel had been wiped down with industrial solvent. There were no signs of forced entry, no blood, and no personal belongings. Even the VIN number had been scratched out. The vehicle had been stripped of anything that could tie it to its driver. This wasn't a panicked getaway or a rushed disposal. It was cold and calculated. Further analysis revealed even more chilling details. The tires had been swapped recently. The GPS module had been removed entirely. This level of effort wasn't just about avoiding detection. It was about erasing presence. The car might as well have been invisible. Police believed the Audi was used as a surveillance and getaway vehicle. Whoever had followed Callum knew his routine and likely anticipated his route. The silence of the execution, the lack of witnesses, and the cleaned-out vehicle all pointed to someone highly trained, or someone experienced with this type of operation. Perhaps even ex-military, or connected to organized crime. Despite the meticulous cleaning, investigators found one small clue: a fibre caught deep in the stitching of the driver's seat. It was traced to a rare European military-style jacket, not sold in the UK. It wasn't enough to identify the killer, but it told them one thing. This wasn't local. The person behind Callum's murder was likely part of something far-reaching and precise, and they had made a critical choice, not just to kill, but to disappear. The discovery of the Audi deepened the mystery and confirmed a growing suspicion. Callum hadn't just been in the wrong place at the wrong time. He had been watched, followed, and eliminated. The black Audi had come to Nottingham with one purpose. It delivered the silent hit, vanished into the shadows, and left behind a single question: who was driving and who had sent them? 3 years after Callum Price's death, his case had gone cold. The investigation had stalled, leads dried up, and media attention faded. His name rarely appeared in conversations, except among the detectives who still believed the story wasn't over. Then, in early 2020, thousands of miles away in Brussels, a rare 15th century manuscript appeared unexpectedly at a Belgian museum. It had been missing for nearly a decade, stolen from a private collection in Valencia, Spain. The sudden reappearance raised questions and eyebrows. More than the manuscript itself, it was what was hidden inside that changed everything. During restoration, a conservator discovered something that didn't belong in a medieval artifact. A thin slit carefully carved into the spine of the book, concealed beneath the original binding. Inside was a microchip, sealed in plastic and expertly hidden. At first, the museum assumed it was a modern tracking device, possibly placed by the thief. But when technicians examined it more closely, it revealed a digital trove, encrypted files, spreadsheets, and communication logs spanning years. Every file pointed to a vast criminal operation involving stolen artwork, smuggled relics, and a network of transporters and middlemen across Europe. Among the names coded within the data was a familiar one: Grayson. Interpol immediately launched an international task force. The files suggested Grayson wasn't just a mysterious figure operating in the shadows. He was a coordinator, a handler. The files showed he moved people, goods, and information with precision. His name was linked to operations in Italy, France, Germany, and the UK. One operation, time-stamped just weeks before Callum's murder, detailed the transfer of sensitive cargo through a channel marked with the initials CP. Investigators believed this referred to Callum Price. The pattern became clearer. Callum had transported something, either the manuscript itself or information related to it. Perhaps unknowingly, he had been part of a carefully timed smuggling run. Whether he discovered the truth or simply became a liability, someone had decided he couldn't be left alive. His murder was no isolated act. It was damage control. This revelation reframed everything. The silent hit in Nottingham wasn't about a local grudge or a personal vendetta. It was the final step in a wider operation meant to silence a courier who had stepped too close to a secret. But the plan hadn't been perfect. The reappearance of the manuscript 3 years later was a crack in the facade. Somehow, despite all their precautions, a piece of the operation slipped back into the world, and it brought with it the buried trail of names and movements, breadcrumbs leading back to Grayson and, indirectly, to Callum's fate. The microchip was shared with UK authorities, reigniting interest in Callum's case. But despite the breakthrough, Grayson remained a ghost. No fingerprints, no official identity, no confirmed sightings. Whoever he was, he had spent years staying one step ahead. The discovery of the manuscript was a stroke of luck, a piece of evidence never meant to be found, and yet it confirmed what detectives had long suspected. Callum's death was never about who he was. It was about what he unknowingly carried. The pieces now fit together in a way they hadn't before. Callum Price, a man once thought to be a personal trainer with a quiet life, had been used as a link in a far larger chain. His movements, his offshore payments, and his secret meetings all pointed toward his unwitting involvement in an international smuggling operation. The murder on Cranmer Street was not just a tragedy. It was a carefully orchestrated strike to remove a risk, a silent hit that slipped beneath the noise of the city, unnoticed, unreported, and almost unsolvable. Once the encrypted microchip had been fully decoded, its contents revealed a broad network of art thieves, traffickers, and fixers. These weren't petty criminals. They were professionals operating under layers of false identities and shell companies. Callum's name, or rather his initials, appeared in a short series of logs that referred to courier handling, CP, Midlands. It was evidence that confirmed his role as a go-between, perhaps unknowingly, for items of high value. Likely, priceless artifacts and documents moved in and out of the UK. The smuggling ring's tactics were precise. Use clean individuals with no prior records, no suspicion, and no obvious ties to criminal elements. Callum had fit that profile perfectly. His financial independence, ability to travel freely, and solitary lifestyle made him an ideal candidate. Someone had recruited him under the guise of something legitimate, and by the time he became aware of the true nature of what he was involved in, it was too late. The fact that he was killed with such efficiency confirmed that he had either asked the wrong questions or was planning to step away. In operations like these, the margin for error is thin. A courier with knowledge becomes a threat, and threats in this world are eliminated swiftly and without trace. After the re-emergence of the manuscript, Interpol coordinated raids across 4 countries. Several arrests were made. Stolen artifacts were recovered. Digital files were seized. But Grayson, if that was even his real name, remained a phantom. Every known alias connected to him led to dead ends. Former associates denied ever meeting him. No face, no fingerprints, no confirmed images. He was a legend in criminal circles, a figure who didn't exist on paper but moved pieces across a global board with ease. And now, one of those pieces, Callum, had nearly exposed him. In the end, Callum Price became more than just a victim. His murder, once just another cold case, had unlocked a global investigation and revealed the scope of a silent economy running beneath the surface. His death was the spark. The hit in Nottingham didn't just silence a man, it shook loose a hidden world. Though justice for Callum remained incomplete, his story forced open doors that had long been shut. Nottingham went back to normal, The headlines faded, but for those who followed the case, something had changed. A reminder that even in the quietest places, the most invisible crimes can ripple across continents. Callum's silence had spoken louder than anyone could have imagined.